They say when you travel with someone, you will really get to know them a lot more. Recently, I traveled with my wife to Malaysia for durians, and I would also like to show you the food we were inspired by to investigate further in future videos, and the amazing durians we ate at several farms and stalls. So my plan was to visit the Bentong region, known for growing the most sought-after durian variety, the Musang King. So would it be any better to eat it fresh at a farm? To find out, I shortlisted some interesting durian farms I found on Google Maps, including one that offers a farm stay experience. I also look forward to meet a durian YouTuber who opened a durian store in Ipoh recently, and he introduced me to the most surprising durian I ate in this whole trip. And as you could probably tell already, I love durians, but my wife wants to see something more. So we included a few more stops in Ipoh to try local food and visit the new Floral Park attraction at Cameron Highlands. We included a stop in KL at the start and the end of this round trip because I know there are many popular food and attractions to check out in the capital city. So first off, we drove from Singapore straight to Kuala Lumpur, and in fact, I'm heading straight to a durian store in the outskirts of KL, recommended by a Malaysian auntie for organic kampong durians for an off-the-beaten-path kind of experience. It's located in a remote part of KL called Semenyih, where there is a durian store which claims to sell organic durians grown by indigenous people living in the forest. And the kampong durians here are not your usual Musang King or D24, but rather it's like a gachapon experience where you never know what you're gonna get from these kampong durians. But luckily, we have the owner here who knows what the insides are like, and he even came up with different names for them. Prices are generally lower here too, so why not give it a try? We were amazed by the quality of the durian. It's thick in texture, like it's a little hard to swallow, and also intense in bittersweet aroma. We had 3 kampong durians for 57 ringgit, and we promised to be back again on the last day of our trip to try this Shan Chong Wang or Kampong King that has to be reserved beforehand. The 2 durians we ate had thick, creamy, buttery taste, and arguably it tastes better than Mao Shan Wang in flavour and complexity. Although the seeds are bigger, but there are many pods and seeds of flesh. I really admire the boss of this durian store who could recognize dozens of different types of durians from the husk, shape, size and color. And he's really passionate about bringing these natural durians from the mountains of Malaysia to let people try these organic durians. And when he says that the durians are organic, he really means it. One durian we had worms, and it didn't really bother us much because it affected just 2 seeds, and the rest of the durian is good. Durian is an amazing fruit which can be eaten even though one part of it is bad or has been eaten by squirrels. And these durian flavors remind me of my past durian adventures, and they are absolutely delicious, more importantly organic. And this is now one of my favorite durian stalls to explore beyond just the Musang King. Next up, Natasha wants fish soup for lunch, so we tried this popular spot. It's bustling with people, and the soup is super thick and heavy in tomato fishy flavor. Unfortunately, she didn't like the soup because it was too thick and too salty for her, that she might lose her hair, she said. I guess she's looking more for that light, savory kind of fish soup broth that's usually seen in Singapore. And when in KL, we have to see the Twin Towers. We haven't been up there before, so we bought the pricey tickets to check out the view up there. KL is really a big city, and we could see the mountains behind too, where we'll be going over and behind them in the next few days. There are hordes of tourists and a fountain below, but it's still really overall a nice place to visit and behold the towers. When we got to our Airbnb, we got a little nasty surprise, but luckily the host was quick to resolve the issue. We had a simple dinner just downstairs as we make it a point to sleep early and set off before sunrise to maximize our time here. The next morning, we came here to try this famous nasi lemak, and it opens at 6:30 am, and we reached here at about 7 am, and it looks quite quiet outside, but there are already a lot of people inside. I mean, wow, the scent of coconut greets you the moment we stepped in, and we tried the nasi lemak and finally understood why it's so popular. I enjoyed the fried chicken with lots of these crispy shards, and according to the friendly boss, he said that it's mostly made up of ginger and sugar deep fried. He also said that the rice is steamed multiple times to remove the starchiness, and I did notice how the rice is very light and fluffy. This is the first time I've heard of such a concept, and his philosophy is to make the coconut rice really easy to eat and not too filling. Just after we left, we came across another homemade nasi lemak where a friendly husband and wife selling packets from the back of a car. There's already a line, so we queued up to check it out. This is something we'll never see in Singapore. We see cars casually parked just to buy packets to go. Compared to village park nasi lemak, the rice is denser and not as fluffy, and this is how rice normally tastes like and fills you quite quickly as you eat it. Next, we hit the road to drive 2 hours up north to Ipoh, and we know we are near there when we start to see these limestone hills. Before we went to see a massive cave, Gua Tempurong, we had to try one of these durian stores along the way. These stores can't be found on Google Maps, and they rely on passing traffic to sell their durians of the day on display. We got a good vibe from the look of the shop and random looking durians, meaning they are from a nearby village and not a farm. The owner looks friendly and laid back, and we had a bitter durian recommended by the owner. The flesh is soft and gloopy and sweet with a little hint of bitterness. Lovely. We opened another durian that had some worms in one compartment while the other parts were edible. When we tried to pay, he declined payment for the second durian, saying that it's because his friends gave it to him, so he's giving it to us. Oh, that's very kind of him. And we chatted with him and found out that he fishes in his spare time outside of the durian season. I think these roadside durian stalls are where we can find the most authentic durian kampong experience, because these durians are from durian trees of people's houses, and these people are not durian farmers, but they grow them for personal consumption. So when in excess, they bring it out to the roadside to sell. But what if nobody buys them? Any unsold durian goes to making tempoyak. The unsold durian flesh is first removed before it's left to ferment to turn into tempoyak, a fermented durian paste. Later in my trip, I plan to try this dish for the first time to learn how it tastes. One of the most underrated nature attractions in Malaysia is Gua Tempurong, and if this place is near KL, I bet there will be hordes of tourists here. It's an amazingly large cave, formed by water eroding the softer limestone over millions of years, leaving behind this massive cavity with marvelous natural rocky tunnel formations. There's even a river in there, and some parts of the river are still dripping with water from above. We visited at a time when there is a school tour, so we got some free guided tours in Malay. And overall, this place is pretty well preserved and easy to see, with the safe stairs and lights to illuminate the cave. Many tourists recommend doing the wet tour too, where you can navigate deeper into the cave through the river, but I prefer to stay dry, and I actually got pretty wet from the sweat of climbing these stairs already. So next up, we drove up to another durian store in Ipoh to learn how and why this young man does it for a living. He said his grandfather left behind a durian plantation to his care, and now he's selling the durians. We tried his recommended apple durian, which was dry, sticky and slightly bitter. He also recommended us a kasap merah, which was a super fleshy durian with a thin husk and several seeds per pod. It's unbelievable how this durian could hold so much meat. It was sweet with a little hint of bitterness, but the main call out here was the sheer amount of flesh that you could dig like an ice cream, hence his nickname Ice Cream Durian. Next up, we have to try this tau hui or soya bean curd that Ipoh is known for. The curds are very smooth and it's so soft that it melts in your mouth, almost like slurping soy milk. And according to the owner, the secret of this texture is to use spring water. Natasha is really excited to try this at home, so I thought we could try to experiment one day how bean curd could turn out using tap water versus mineral water like Evian water for example. And I think that the concentration of soy milk or the percentage solid raw beans content could also play a part to the texture. Another famous dish is salt-baked chicken in Ipoh with lots of herby flavour. And I think that the reason why the meat is so juicy and tender throughout, even at the breast, is because the chicken is dry brined in salt, enabling the meat to retain moisture better even after baking for long. The parchment paper also helps to keep the chicken juices in there while it's baked low and slow to cook this kampong chicken evenly. And the result is the meat is chewy, bouncy and juicy. There are also many bakeries here which sells flaky biscuits and sweet treats fresh, including this addictive peanut candy that is so crunchy, fatty and sweet. We stayed beside Lost World of Tambun, a water theme park surrounded by limestone hills, and it's super windy here. Very nice view and a fun place to go if we were still kids. For dinner, we had to try Ipoh hor fun and bean sprouts. The hor fun or rice noodles here is smooth and soft, similar to the Vietnamese pho noodles. And the soup is light and incredibly savory, with a slight tinge of acid freshness, probably from a few tomatoes. However, we found the rice to be a little hard, dry, and not oily enough for us, so we'll go more with the noodles instead. The soup is a pale orange color, probably due to its chicken stock base, and the chicken meat is tender like a 63 to 65 degrees Celsius chicken. The ginger sauce is well balanced, not too spicy and savory, and the bean sprouts are shorter and fatter than what I usually see, and they are a little more crunchy and juicy. The use of white pepper sprinkled on this dish is a distinct feature here to elevate the flavors. The next morning, we were craving for dim sum for breakfast and tried this popular place. It's a fast-paced breakfast shop where workers are constantly pushing out items on the tray, tempting you to buy them even before you manage to take a seat actually. And the food is quite cheap and in small tasting portions, so you could easily order a lot of dishes as the servers persuade you to buy more. But the quality actually leaves us wanting more because the prawns used are a little small and mushy. The egg tart was starchy, not warm, so it was quite disappointing. That's why we went over to a traditional breakfast joint where they have a commercial oven on site to bake fresh tarts. The egg tarts are much fresher, still hot when we got them, and has the crispy edges. It's also more eggy in flavor. And just opposite, this shop also has an electric grill for breakfast where they spread a sweet eggy kaya on some grilled toast. The kaya is a little too sweet for me, but it has a nice thick coconut fragrance, and you can also buy the kaya by the bottle. Finally, I got to meet Stephen Phua at his durian store. He's such a nice guy and he shares his knowledge about durians freely. As Ipoh was in the late season and had very few varieties left, he introduced me to some Thai durians, which I was skeptical at first. But when allowed to reach its full potential actually, it's really a good durian. These are Thai durian breeds that are grown in Malaysia and allowed to fully ripen on the tree. The first one I had is Kan Yao, rich and so thick that it's difficult to swallow, and it tastes a little bit like D24. Whereas this monster-looking durian is Chani, and its flavor surpassed my expectations. It's bitter with that bruise over there, and the flesh is soft, wrinkly textured, and buzzing with boozy flavor. Wow, I'm so impressed. Steven also shared his struggles to grow as a pro YouTuber. He is very generous too and shared with us a Musang King which he originally kept for himself. I look forward to visit him again to go to his farm. We packed the rest of the durian to savor in the mountains and got ahead of a heavy rain for Cameron Highlands. The road up is windy and can be quite challenging to drive as you're constantly challenged by bending roads. But with the low gear engaged, it helps the vehicle to accelerate faster after a bend and avoid overheating the brakes. Alas, we arrived at the tea plantations along Cameron Highlands, and it was an idea to stay at this glamping site. Apparently, it's the most popular lodging in this area. This is actually a farm, and the road is semi-paved for one vehicle only, so if you encounter a vehicle ahead, because you gotta reverse all the way back, or find a nook to let the vehicle pass. The owners built these glamorous tents for rent, and this place is actually fully booked for the month we visited. While the place might not be as comfortable as modern homes, but the natural environment makes up for it, and it could be in a cloud too. And guess what I'm having for breakfast? Durians. These durians have been sitting out here at 16 degrees Celsius the whole night, and eating durians in the mountains with clouds hits differently. The flesh is cold, but it warms you. Cameron Highlands strawberries aren't that great actually, as they are small and quite sour. But after that rich, fruity breakfast, we had the energy to hike past a vegetable farm to a small forest, and the clouds touching the hills is actually the reason why this forest here can get all mossy like that due to the humidity in the air, which is like 95 to 100% because the clouds are saturated with moisture. The forest has this mysterious and enchanting look due to moss growing all over the trees, covering almost the entire tree trunk to the branches. But they should not be touched because they are fragile and very slow growing. The roots can be quite challenging too, as the steps are very uneven in height. Going down is actually more difficult than going up due to how steep the steps can be, some up to half a body height. Then we were transported to a modern floral park where the roads are fully paved for easy walking, and the abundance of flowers here is breathtaking. Coupled with steep hills and colourful landscaping, this is a relatively new attraction, and more expansion is actually work in progress. There's also a cute cafe up there that makes pretty desserts completely edible for a 4D experience where you get to eat the flowers grown here, which are actually tasteless by the way, but they just look nice to eat together with a dark brownie. Everything else on the plate can be bought in supermarkets, but it's a very well assembled dessert served in the right location to make a good profit. Down the winding roads of Cameron Highlands, we're on our way to Bentong, the town of durians, and this is where we stayed for the night under a durian tree. It's a nice chalet overlooking some mountains and hugged by a durian tree. We found a durian in the net the next morning, but unfortunately it wasn't as tasty as the nasi lemak we had for breakfast. We passed by a local breakfast place besides a mosque selling roti canai and durians, and the stems are wrapped with a leaf, perhaps to cover the cross-section and to maintain freshness. This is a variety called D2, and it was alright for a village durian. On the way to a durian farm, we came across what looks like a distribution center of durians where truckloads of durians from farmers are sorted by size and breed and then packed for further delivery. Never seen anything like this before. Finally, we arrived at this durian farm located in Rawup, a small town in Bentong, and this is where I could literally pick my durians. I only recommend it if you're a hardcore durian fan to experience the life of a durian farmer or a durian farm worker. They carried these baskets and traversed through slopey terrains to retrieve durians fallen on the ground and also on the net. Then they brush off the leaves using a comb to clean it for consumption. You can really get up close with these low-hanging fruits on the tree, and I hear occasional thuds as durians land on the ground, and it sends an adrenaline rush to go and find it and pick it up. Durian farmers prefer to grow these trees on hills because the drainage is better, which leads to better fruit quality. The D24 durians here don't have nets because the shells are thicker, whereas the Musang King, the prized breed, can crack upon impact, so they have nets to catch the fallen durians. Speaking of falling durians, it can either fall onto the ground or into the basket behind me, or at worst onto my head. But don't worry, I got insurance and still survived to tell the tale. This is a free activity experience at this farm where you can pick the durians to your heart's content, and it can get pretty heavy because each durian weighs at least 1 kg. We were rewarded with a nice view at the top of the hill, and in 1 hour, I managed to collect like 2 baskets of durians and I was exhausted. At the end of this intense exercise, I handpicked 3 durians that I really want to try. But first, we were given this gag fruit to try. It has this yummy looking orange color, but I was disappointed that the pulp around the seed has no taste at all and it's just the way it is. Anyway, I tried my hand at opening the durian and I was defeated by it. A fresh durian is incredibly hard to open, so luckily they have this device where it's easy for anyone to rip open a durian, thanks to physics. The first durian we had is D24. It has a big, tasty pulp that is bittersweet, and the texture is dry, thick, and very filling to swallow. The next durian is Musang King, and the best ones in my opinion have a small curvy shape like this one. We call it sleeping cat, like how a cat curls up when it sleeps. This fruit had only 2 pulps, but the taste is very concentrated, bittersweet. It's the best one I had at this farm. The last one is Tekka, or green bamboo, and it's the most difficult durian I've ever opened because it's huge. but I was rewarded with a creamy flesh that's bittersweet with a little hint of caramel. After a whole afternoon at the durian farm, we hit the road again to try some lemang at this famous restaurant. Lemang is a traditional local food that is basically glutinous rice cooked with coconut milk in these bamboo poles over an open flame barbecue, imparting a smoky fragrance to the sticky rice that is chewy and fatty with coconut milk. For the night, we checked into a hotel that looks like an old town in Europe perched on a mountain. The room is okay, but overall we still prefer an Airbnb experience in a local home. In Bentong, to get an insight of what locals eat for breakfast, we headed to the market where it's bustling with people who are patiently queuing up to pick and choose their dishes, and every piece here feels handmade and the fried food is freshly fried. But of course, there's more durian in the streets, but you can tell that the durians are not as fresh as you get in the farm because the stems here look drier and shriveled up, but the quality here is still good to eat. Bentong also has a big animal farm with all sorts of land animals and birds, and it's actually a petting zoo too where you can touch some of them. The place is well maintained and generally clean as I didn't get any allergic flu from touching these animals. Another durian farm we visited begins with a bumpy ride on a country road, and the bumpy 4-wheel drive right in and out is actually part of the attraction here, but I'm not quite a fan of it. We had a few kampong durian varieties and also a decent Musang King. But the most surprising durian I had here is this Borneo durians. It's smaller than usual and has longer curly thorns. I never thought I could try this here. These durians are not widely cultivated in mainland Malaysia, and after trying it, I know why. It tastes like sticky, unseasoned raw eggs with a hint of cempedak, banana and strawberry flavour. Interesting, but not something I would binge on like regular durians. Before heading out to our stay for the night, we checked out this natural waterfall which actually has a natural dipping pool right at the bottom where families play in this fresh water. We finally arrived at the durian farm again to stay for the night. It's overlooking an expressway, but inside is actually quiet. The plantation roads are also well paved, and most trees here are Musang King, so they are netted. And it's an easier picking experience as you just have to try to get the durians off the net. In the farm, you get to choose the prettiest and the plumpest durians like this one. Before we tried it, we headed out to try patin tempoyak at this restaurant which claims to serve the best in Malaysia. It has a cool concept like IKEA where you get your food in a trolley and then pay at the counters decorated like a toll gate which drivers would find familiar. This place is better than the average restaurant because the meat dishes are cling filmed to prevent flies. So what exactly is patin tempoyak? It's basically a fish head curry made using tempoyak or fermented durian. Patin or fish head is delicious as the head is so fresh, there's no foul fishiness in there, and the meat is tender and juicy. And the curry? Surprisingly, it doesn't taste like durian at all. Instead, it has this sweet, almost pineapple-like flavour to it, and yet it doesn't contain any pineapples. The prawn noodles are also surprisingly good, as they use a thick prawn broth which is reduced after intensely firing it over a stove. After we're back at the farm, the owner has an Asian American friend who cooks Italian food for guests in an outdoor kitchen, although the pan looks a little sus. Not sure if it was a non-stick pan before and the coating had worn off completely, revealing an aluminum surface, but the pasta was good, plenty of olive oil, garlic and sardines. For dessert, the big durian we picked earlier was 3 kg, but unfortunately it had burned seeds inside and it was half ripe, so the flavour wasn't great. But we left some of it to ferment overnight and the next morning it tasted slightly better. But no morning is complete in a durian farm until I go durian picking in the dark for a full day and night experience. Again, this reminds me of the days when I picked durians in the dark forest in the wee hours. The thrill and the excitement when you hear a durian drop is even more than in the day. Here, you can see the difference between the one that I just picked versus the ones that have been here the day before. The owner kindly treated us to one more durian for breakfast before we headed back to KL to try this local Malay breakfast at a warung. These are family-owned eateries and the food looks amazingly good. We had the quintessential nasi lemak in Kerabu style which originates from East Malaysia as we didn't have the time to go there. The rice is bluish in colour from the blue pea flour which doesn't add any flavour, but it tricks me to believe that it's tastier. And it really is compared to the usual nasi lemak because the secret is in the sambal made with more herbs and aromatics that I'm tasting like lemongrass, lime leaf, ginger, giving a more tangy edge to it. The fried chicken thigh is still warm and the chicken has a salty kampong flavor to it. This place also serves fluffy steamed bun with lovely kaya that is light, smooth and with a generous dressing of coconut milk to dip the soft steamed buns into. Overall, the nasi kerabu is really the star here and I would be happy to eat this again. Next up, we went to try this popular roast meat joint that only opens 3 hours a day. They open at noon and close at 3 PM. And this is the situation at 1 PM. It looks ridiculously packed, with people standing around waiting for a table and there's still a line of people queuing to buy food. We sat next to a group who complained about the long waiting time too, and after 1.5 hours, ours arrived and Natasha was not happy with it. She said it was nothing special, but I do notice that the meat was meticulously prepared by Mr. Wong by cutting out the excess fat, so you get a good balance of meat and fat. But that means longer waiting time for everybody. We went over to another roast meat restaurant famous for its charred meat, and it's so oily that it's oozing with oil. That's not water, it's oil. And the roast pork was also served in the similar portion size as earlier, but there's a lot more fatty part to it compared to the prime cuts of the belly. Mr. Wong's pork belly does feel more premium, or maybe we just got the lucky prime part, but the weight is excruciating and not really worth it in our opinion. We had to try one more place, and it's this clay pot rice blasted over a charcoal stove. It's rice seasoned with soy sauce and some meat, and the intense heat burns the rice underneath, giving it a nice crunch and extra fragrant nutty aroma. Very little waiting time here, so you get served piping hot rice fast. Our last overnight stay is at this fancy hotel with some Airbnb units, and it has an infinity pool overlooking KL Tower, and you get to see the Twin Towers really up close too. And the most popular attraction in KL probably has to be Batu Caves. There are many Hindu temples here, and it's teeming with people climbing up and down the rainbow stairs. Up there, I was rewarded with a cave with holes in the roof, even a big one that lets light in, causing these cliff-hanging plants to grow all over the place. You can see Hindu ceremonies going on in there, and the stairs are also used to roll down bags of, rubbish for the day. But overall, it's a colourful place to visit, and best of all, it's free entry, just had to pay for parking. For dinner, we checked out this local family-owned restaurant serving Hakka Lei Ta or thunder rice tea. It has this thick herbal basil soup that is rich and it feels like it heals you as you drink it. It also has a slight nutty aroma to it. This place has lovely homemade grandma vibes, so we'll be back again to try more of the dishes. On our last breakfast, we tried this popular dim sum restaurant. It's bright and openly displays its Portuguese egg tarts. It comes with caramelized sugars on top and buttery and flaky puff pastry with a sweet eggy center. Very well-rounded and delicious egg tart. The smaller one is also good with buttery flaky puff and eggy flavors but without the caramelized sugar notes. She likes this egg tart so much that she bought more to take away. The classical dim sum dishes are also generally well prepared in this place. The chicken feet is also juicier and fattier, probably due to the bigger chickens here. And the xiao long bao also rivals Din Tai Fung as the soup flavour is stronger and more porky, but the dough here is a little firmer and not as soft and bouncy as Din Tai Fung. Overall, I like this place better than the earlier dim sum restaurant as the servers here are not pushy and you still get what you order very quickly. More importantly, the quality of the ingredients here is much better, like bigger, crunchier prawns and balance of flavours. We'll be back again. And before we go for durian, we had to try hand-torn noodles or mee hoon kueh, because we heard a radio DJ recommending this place while we were on the road, and it's actually a simple bowl of noodles with the stock made from anchovies and shallots, but it brings back a nostalgic comfort as you eat it. Every bowl is individually cooked, and it bubbles up due to the starch in the noodles. They have a machine to ensure consistent flatness of the noodles. Mee hoon kueh is actually Natasha's comfort food, and we have this quite often at home on weekends. And finally, as promised, We're back at this unassuming durian stall again, serving organic durians. Some were even bitten by squirrels. The highlight of this visit is actually the durian that the boss calls Shan Zhong Wang or Hilltop King. It has an unbelievable amount of flesh for a kampong durian, almost like a Thai durian, but the flesh is ripe, dry, sticky, and bittersweet. Everything you want in a durian. And the husk is also incredibly thin. So the boss said that there's only one such tree in the forest and he has a big trunk, so it's probably about 100 years old. A net is set up to catch the fruit so that the husk doesn't break on impact. The seeds are also shrunken, which is rare for a kampong durian. Because of this rarity, this durian is actually priced similar to a Musang King. While the flavor isn't as strong, but the novelty, the super big meat, and the grassy, bittersweet flavors makes this worth a try. Another random kampong variety which I sniffed out happens to have bitter flesh which is amazingly thick but with big seeds. It came also with natural defects and worms, but it's still delicious to eat. The bitter numb taste is what makes this a more special eating experience than Musang King. And that wraps up our durian trip in Malaysia. The next time we hit the road again, I hope we could go to Penang where we try the durians there, and we'll also be back again to try more Malaysian food.